But now it's time to talk about mental health. I know it's something that covers incredible ignorance. A lot of people are unaware about if they are suffering from it or if others are suffering from it, and if they are, how to deal with it. We learned earlier in the show that 1 in 4 people can actually suffer from mental health, but like I said, it's still something there is a great stigma attached to. We're now very lucky to be joined by Aftika Ramal and Kamana Mosabir, who are from SEVA, and they're going to be talking to us about mental health, particularly in ethnic communities. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, first of all, could you just get right back to basics and outline what it is exactly you do and what SEVA does do?
Well, SEVA work with the community as well as with statutory organisations. We're based at the Pakistani Resource Centre, which is near on Oxford Road in the city centre. SEVA actually is a partnership of 2 different organisations across the board. There's Pakistani Resource Centre, the Waiyan Chinese Women's Centre, and African Caribbean Mental Health Service. And what we do a range of different, provide a range of different services. And there's 8 community development workers working across the board, working with different communities. For example, myself, I work with the Pakistani community, Rahina works with the Bangladeshi community, and Najia, who's one of our colleagues at the Pakistani Resource Centre, works with the Indian communities. But we've got other colleagues who are working with different communities as well, and majority of the work is raising awareness about mental health in the community, and like you said, getting rid of the stigma attached to mental health.
Rahina, when we mention mental health, what are we referring to here? What sort of things?
I think when we're talking about mental health, we're essentially talking about your thoughts and emotions, and I think a lot of people kind of think about mental health in different ways, but it's essentially your cognitive and your kind of emotions, which of course has an impact on your behaviour. But of course, understanding of mental health does differ from culture to culture, religion and so on.
So what are the different forms of mental illnesses? Because obviously it's very diverse, there's a whole host of them. What are sort of the main ones there?
I think mental distress, like you said, does come in many forms. Some terms are used to diagnose mental illnesses such as stress, depression, anxiety and so on, are used in common kind of everyday language in a way. So we're all quite familiar with those terms. But again, I think they're used quite loosely. And the danger of that is it actually underestimates the severity and the kind of debilitating impact it has on people.
Particularly sort of something like depression. Somebody might say, oh, I feel really depressed today, I'm having a bad day. It's used so commonly that it dumbs down and doesn't actually give credit to what depression is. Depression is very, very different than just having a bad day. Anxiety is very different than just feeling a little bit out of sorts, isn't it?
Exactly. So mental illnesses, I think, fall under 3 different categories depending on their severity. We have the mild form, the moderate, and then the severe forms. I think in the mild form we could put down depression, anxiety and stress, but stress can also be, and depression can also fall within the moderate kind of form, with obsessive compulsive disorder, personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder and those type of conditions. And then the more severe forms of mental illnesses would be schizophrenia and bipolar, also known as manic depression. But having said that, I don't think anybody with any of those mental health conditions would actually be stuck at one of these levels. I think so a lot of the times the conditions do move up and down this scale of severity, if you like, depending on the support that they have available to them and also the circumstances in which they find themselves.
Now, 1 in 4 people do suffer from a mental illness at one stage in their life. That's actually staggering. That's 25%, and I think people don't actually realise how widespread and how common it can be. Do you find there's a lot of ignorance surrounding mental health?
Yeah, there is a lot of ignorance, especially with the South Asian or the BME community in general. And I mean, in the media as well, there's a lot of celebrities who have been facing mental health problems who have actually come forward. And obviously the purpose for them to do this is obviously so that people don't have that stigma anymore.
Do you find that helps then with a lot of public figures? Kerry Katona has been suffering from bipolar. Katie Price admitted that she had depression, particularly postnatal depression. Do you think that's helping people to relate to it and to feel that it's not so much an isolated illness we don't talk about, but actually people you can relate to, people that seem untouchable, these celebrities, can in fact actually just be as vulnerable as anybody else?
Yeah, it does. But I mean, one thing that I would say is that people from ethnic minorities need to come forward as well. I mean,
Right.
a lot of the time you see people from non-ethnic minorities coming forward expressing what they've been through, which is quite good, and obviously encourages the youth especially as well to talk about the issues if they're going through something and seek help. But what we need to see is people from ethnic minorities who are going through this, and only when people who are in celebrity status, for example, they come forward, can we get rid of the stigma, because once they come forward, people will follow suit.
You mentioned there about, you know, ethnic minority celebrities. You mentioned some of the groups that you worked with. How important is it for, you know, someone suffering to be able to relate to, you know, someone within their community who's got it, as opposed to the other groups that are out there?
Well, it is quite important, because obviously everyone has a role model, and if you're following that, you know, the way you dress, what you wear, everything, and if someone from the ethnic minority comes forward and says that, you know, we've been suffering from mental health, this is what sort of help that we went to seek, and, you know, this is how we did it. And obviously people within ethnic minorities where the stigma is quite high will come forward and say, well, this isn't a common problem, we don't need to hide an individual behind closed doors, it's common knowledge, you know, and the more we can talk about it within ethnic minorities, the more we can, you know, bring people out and seek help.
So is it more prevalent in ethnic minorities then? Why do you feel the need to have to publicise it and promote it and work with ethnic minorities as opposed to, you know, mental health as a whole?
Well, it's been found, a lot of research has been done, like you said, 1 in 4 people suffer from mental health, and which, like you said, is quite high. And within ethnic minorities, a lot of people need to see that within whichever generation, for example, within the older generation, dementia and Alzheimer's, it's just seen as a part of growing up. Obviously, that's not the case. A lot of studies have been done with South Asian women, where they found that there's higher levels of depression than other communities, and also self-harm with young girls is quite common, but the problem is not identified and nothing's been done about it. And also with younger males, drug-induced mental health problems is quite common. I mean, and you'll see them suffering from paranoia and delusions.
Do you find that pride is something that stops a lot of people coming forward because there is such a stigma? People may, you know, particularly don't want their families to know and don't want to sort of admit that they have this weakness, which isn't a weakness, which can affect anybody. But obviously that is how it's sometimes perceived. Do you think that is something that's an obstacle you must overcome?
Yes, I think a lot of the times mental health services and the support that's available in mainstream mental health services is not accessed because of pride related to kind of the cultural stigma attached to mental health. And also there are different perceptions of mental illnesses depending on what religion and faith background you're from. So there are a host of different factors affecting when you actually access help and where you actually seek that help. A lot of the times the GP or mental health services would be the last resort for people. They would access support in faith organisations, religious institutions, faith leaders and so on. So I think it's not only stigma but also misconceptions around mental health. So like you said earlier, like you asked whether it's more prevalent within the South Asian community, I don't think it's more prevalent as such. It's the fact that support isn't accessed early enough. So that's the problem that we're trying to address.
Is it the same sort of problems that encounter everyone, or within an ethnic minority is there different things you know that can sort of cause these things to happen, different worries, different things to...
Yeah, I think there are like a range of different kind of causal factors when it comes to mental illnesses, ranging from your genetic disposition, physical health, social environment, your financial circumstances and all sorts. But there are identified risks to mental illnesses which do differ from community to community. And in the South Asian community, I think a feeling of isolation is one prevalent factor, because, especially amongst the older generation facing cultural and language barriers, as well as migrant spouses perhaps.
So, sorry, how does, you know, we went through the papers at the beginning, they're sort of blaming the sort of population boost on, you know, the immigration factor and things like that. Do you find that people read this and then sort of can put that into hostility towards people from the Asian community then?
I think they can. Obviously, media plays a large part in the way that we perceive things around us, and migrant communities is one community that's subject to that type of treatment. But and because of that, I think they are further isolated. Refugees and asylum seekers are one target group within our remit that we're trying to tackle. Mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder is very high amongst those communities. But again, they don't really have much access to adequate support.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. The contact information has been across the screen, so if anybody at home is feeling that they themselves may be suffering from a mental health issue, or if they have a family or friend member who they also want to help, of course, they can get support from SEVA. Thank you so much, guys.